Thanks, everyone. Today we have an amazing panel of experts who are all working to suffuse artificial intelligence in all its various forms into the curriculum in schools nationwide, and they're going to tell you how they plan to do it. Next to me here, we have Blaine Dilg. She is head of strategic partnerships at OpenAI, the organization best known for bringing ChatGPT into the world. She's joined with Tara Natras from ISTE and ASCD, an education nonprofit. We have Hadi Partovi, the CEO of Code.org and a well-known tech entrepreneur, and Catherine Truitt, who is the North Carolina Schools Superintendent, who just became the fourth state to issue guidance on how to use artificial intelligence in the schools. Please welcome our panelists. Educators are grappling with how to use AI. There's a spectrum of opinion and fear levels, from people who are very frightened of how to use it and don't want a thing to do with it, to those who are experts embracing it and knowing that our children are going to need to be facile in artificial intelligence in order to thrive in their future careers and professions. I'd like to open it up to the panel to ask you, what is your top priority when it comes to bringing AI into school curricula? What is the urgency? What needs to be done most urgently and first in your mind?
So I think there are so many answers there. I think where we are particularly focused is how we can support teachers and administrators. And that is really trying to understand what are the policy frameworks that people need in order to look at deployment, and who are the best partners really to be out there providing that guidance and advice. And then honestly, what are the use cases that teachers are finding most valuable, and how can we help to support that learning and conversations among educators about how they can step in and begin using the technology in a safe way, supported by their districts and by their leaders?
And I think, so we are ISTE and ASCD. For those of you who don't know, that is the International Society for Technology and Education. And we focus a lot on transforming learning. And so as we look at what's happening with AI, one of the things that really is a focus for us is, what are our goals in the education space? What are the kinds of things we want to see in our classrooms for students? And what role might AI play in that, right? We're having a lot of conversations right now around efficiency and other things. And what we really want to get at is what does this mean in terms of pedagogy? What does this mean in terms of the kinds of environments we want to see for our students? And so we're very much focused on the redesign of learning. We're very much focused on how do we prepare our students as the next generation of AI designers, because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, they're the ones who are going to be sitting here making these decisions. And then also very focused on convening educators. What are the things that district leaders need? What do teachers need? And how then they in turn can support students, because this is new for all of us, right? And when we look at what's happening in the education space and the number of other things that educators are grappling with, what role does AI play in that when we're talking about a lot of the other issues?
How do you
I have a number of thoughts. You asked what should be done immediately. I have two immediate thoughts, but also a longer term thought. The most immediate thing, and this is already happening whether policymakers embrace it or not, is teachers using AI to save themselves time. One of the fastest growing AI companies is a company called Magic School, which has almost 2.5 million teachers have already signed up to use its tools just to save teaching time, for making lesson plans, for making individualized education programs for students. Saving teachers time is just goodness for the entire education system. The second urgent thing, I think, is giving students basic AI literacy, not only to use AI as a tool, but to understand how it works. This is why it's so important to teach computer science in schools, so students don't just become users of technology, but also creators of technology. And the advent of AI has made that more important.
Maybe you could mention how Code AI works. I know you're trying to suffuse the curriculum of K through 12 with computer science education.
Sure, yeah. Code.org has for 10 years now been promoting computer science to be a basic part of education. And at this point, it's important enough that I believe it should be a graduation requirement for every student to graduate from high school. There's now clear evidence that shows that students who take a high school computer science course see a causal impact on their earnings, lifetime earnings, within 5 years of graduating from high school. And so, why would we not have students take a course that is just going to guarantee an impact on their improved earning potential? And that earning potential is going to be even more in an age of AI. One of the things I say is that most educators feel like they are creating the technology and we are receiving the technology and figuring out what do we do with it next. Like, what are they going to come up with next? And the reality is the only difference between the we and the they is education. We are all humans. It's just that those ones who have a computer science background are creating this technology, and those of us who don't are receiving it and wondering what they will come up with next. And as educators, we should give every kid the basic empowerment to be creators in the future world. So those are my thoughts.
Catherine, what are your priorities?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and put a bow on this. When we've heard a lot today about workforce development and its role that it has in higher education, and we've talked a little bit about K-12, infusing AI into the K-12 experience is part of workforce development. Just last week, Microsoft published a report, I believe it's called AI in the Workplace. 71% of employers said that they would rather hire someone who was less skilled in whatever they're being hired for, but had AI competencies under their belt. It is, to your point, we have a partnership in North Carolina with code.org. Computer science is a graduation requirement now in North Carolina, as is personal literacy and finance. And also, we have just recently mandated that all students graduate with a career development plan. And we also have a portrait of a graduate that is workforce aligned, that includes things like empathy, like the governor mentioned. But all of these things, if we're going to realign K-12 education and say that all learning is in service to eventually getting a job so students can pursue the post-secondary plans of their choice, we must ensure that both children and their teachers are AI literate.
Catherine, you just mentioned that one reason you came out with guidance was that one of your districts had banned ChatGPT when it first came out, and you needed to set some ground rules to say, hey, this stuff can be used for good. What have you seen happen? How did you craft the guidelines, and what kind of evolution have you seen in the thinking about artificial intelligence in the classroom?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. One of our larger urban districts banned ChatGPT, which of course I get as a kind of a natural knee-jerk reaction to something that's a little daunting in education. But the truth is that that's not an equitable decision, because students who do not have access to this technology at home will then not have it at school. And for all the reasons that we've all just said, this has to be a part of the daily experience of students in school. So we set out, we worked across our agency, and we set out to create guidance that was more of a playbook rather than a list of do's and don'ts. It was designed to be iterative. It's a living document that is always being updated. Of course, we're a local control state like most states, and so we cannot push this and require districts to use it, but we made it painless for districts to get their hands on this guidance. We held what we called just an AI summit regionally across the state. And just tried to make it as easy as possible. And I think one of the neatest things about it, and anyone can find this on the Department of Public Instruction's website, is that it has a usage guide that's really just set up like a traffic light that gives teachers language that they can craft assignments and say, okay, you may not use AI on this assignment, or you may use some AI, but you cannot use it to generate your writing, or you must use ChatGPT to generate your writing. And what we're talking about here, and this will have implications for higher ed as well, is redefining what cheating means.
Yeah, we have a lot of conversations with state departments of education and district leaders, and trying to shift that conversation from the cheating focus, right? Because it's creating this environment of fear, right? Students are afraid to talk about what they're doing with AI tools because they're afraid of the consequences, because we haven't yet created a natural conversation in classrooms about what AI looks like, because educators and students are still building their AI literacy, and they have a little bit of the fear that you were talking about earlier. And so what are the things we can do, whether it's with stoplights or the AI assessment scale that we see in different areas, helping teachers say, if these are the goals of what you're trying to teach, what role might AI play in that, is really the focus of the conversation, so that we can shift from, oh, you've used AI, therefore you've cheated, which is not the logic model we want to see.
Right.
But what we really want is, what are the things that we can use AI for that are helpful to your learning, and what are the things that are harmful to your learning, right? And how do we help kids make that distinction as they're learning about AI on their own, right? And so that's a lot
It's
of
really ironic, because the student who's afraid of being cheating because they use too much AI is the same student that the employer is more likely to
right,
want
they
to hire.
want, right? But we're not
100%.
having the conversation
Yes.
to the degree that we need to with teachers and students, so that we can have exactly that discussion.
Lane,
And I-
OpenAI, yeah, tell me what you've been seeing.
Well, I just was going to say, we do think that just use of the technology is really important, because when we talk about AI, different people think different things. I mean, I like to be sure that I talk about it as a tool, right? It's a tool that can help, it can help you with brainstorming, it can help you with drafting, it can help you with data analysis, it can help you with coding. And it can do that through a variety of sort of multimodal interactions. So you can do that by speaking and having it speak back. You can do that with images. You can give it images to analyze. You can get images back. And that multimodal piece, really important for people to understand how that's happening. And then you can use it in a multilingual way. So you can actually talk to it in English, but get a result back in Spanish. Once people start to get their hands on the technology, it really helps people, I think, to understand both the benefits and the risks, honestly, in a more firsthand way. And we talk a lot about how people have an aha moment sometimes of just thinking, oh, this is useful, and it's useful in this particular way, and I don't want to use it in this particular way personally. And that we think is really important. So I think we do really appreciate the challenges that encourage people to put their hands on the technology for different purposes that administrators and leaders have decided are proper and appropriate, and then to really encourage that use. And for that reason, it's important to us also to be providing things in our free product, also for equity reasons and otherwise, to make sure that people can get their hands on these capabilities and start experimenting with them now, even as we're working on development and safety for more powerful models. We really do want people to be thinking through now, how is this useful to me, and how can I use it?
Yeah.
And what are my concerns?
Hadi mentioned a couple of use cases. Teachers are using it to design lesson plans, to personalize lessons for individual students, to show students how to evaluate what they find on the internet and see whether it seems accurate and believable or not. Yet, on the other hand, the fear comes in from its use in deep fakes or in cheating and plagiarism. Many people make the comparison to when the calculator came out and everybody was fearful about cheating at that point. What are the best ways to equip teachers to use this tool, particularly teachers who may feel like their students know more about this technology than they do?
Well, there's multiple things. The first thing I'd say is teachers should get their own personal familiarity, because this fear that the kids get it and I don't, there's an easy solution to that. Like, start using AI yourself. And there's many, many different options for teachers. I mentioned Magic School, Khan Academies, Khanmigo is another one, and obviously ChatGPT or Microsoft's Copilot. There's so many options that teachers can use for just doing basic things like write a lesson plan about, and then whatever, about photosynthesis for 8th grade biology class, and it'll just do it for you. And then once you start getting going, that familiarity is the most important. But I really think the most important after that basic familiarity is rethinking the purpose of education. Not just changing how we teach, but questioning what do we want kids to learn? What are the most important learning requirements and outcomes we want kids to get out of K through 12? We're still teaching the same stuff that schools were teaching hundreds of years ago, and our world is rapidly, rapidly changing. So explaining how AI works, making students AI literate, things like teaching financial literacy, computer science, these types of things are much more relevant today than much of the curriculum that we've been teaching for the last few hundred years. And schools are suffering with having too many requirements being placed on them, and I think we need to ease back on some of the older, outdated stuff in order to make space for what kids want to learn. And the reason kids want to learn is they know this is more relevant for their future. And teachers mostly know that as well, and policymakers are basically sort of keeping the system in the past instead of kind of rethinking the future of education.
I would love to piggyback on that. I agree with everything you just said, and I would add that it's not just policymakers keeping the system in the back. I think that the whole of human evolution has been about using the next thing to replace the human work, right? I mean, the idea that with each new invention, human work has gotten easier or has changed course, and this is just the next iteration of that. What we didn't see happen in education with the invention of Google and the internet was exactly what you just described. We did not see teaching and learning change. And so I really hope that that's not the case with this technology, because teaching and learning looks exactly the same, with the exception of the fact that many children have computers in the classroom, and but the types of regurgitation we still ask students to do, by and large, the lack of critical thinking, the lack of collaborative learning, for whatever reason you want to attribute that, is still there. And so while we may have learned in our education prep programs not to ask kids Googleable questions, we still do. And so my hope is that we're going to see, as AI becomes more ubiquitous across both teaching and learning, that we're going to see more teacher professional development. This has got to filter down into higher education EPPs so that this generation of teachers is infusing it every day in what they're doing. But again, to me, what happened with Google and the internet is a cautionary tale for this time that we're entering, because I don't think that much changed.
Well, and I think we have to be cognizant of, like, if you look at the North Carolina profile or portrait of a graduate?
Portrait.
Thank you, right? Profile of a learner, profile of a graduate, pick the word portrait, right? But all of them, regardless of what you're looking at, they focus on critical thinking, they focus on creativity and communication and collaboration and the skills and attributes that are going to be most important in our worlds moving on. And when we look at some of the AI tools and some of the things teachers are using them for right now, I'm not sure they're helping us get to building students as creators and communicators if I'm using it to create a lesson plan, and that lesson plan doesn't push my kids' thinking in this way, right? We're perpetuating the practices that we've already had. And so I think the goal has to be, how do we use these tools to think beyond where we are now? What's our vision 5 years from now? And how do these tools help us get to that vision, not continue to perpetuate some of the ineffective practices we've seen? And so we have to shift the conversation, knowing, though, that right now only 18% of teachers, I think the RAND study said, are AI users, and about 15% are triers. So we're having this conversation, but we've got to elevate it for all of our teachers. But how do we make sure that as we're using these tools, it's to get at creativity and critical thinking and all of the things we want for our kids, not to continue what we've seen in education over the last several decades?
And I do think it's important to think of the tools as tools that can help with brainstorming, and the outputs are absolutely better with human critical thinking, right? So I have recently asked ChatGPT, how do I bake a cake in the shape of a volcano? And it will answer that question, and that I might just ask it a question and get an answer back. But I think when you're actually focusing on learning, it can be an incredible tool for that brainstorming. how can I help a student who is particularly interested in this area to approach this kind of algebra problem? So really thinking about that personalization, it can be quite good in. But then also just learning. I have really enjoyed all the conversations that I've had over this morning and yesterday evening, and was talking with someone about how I needed to learn more about advanced manufacturing at one point recently. And I actually drove to and from meetings for about an hour talking with ChatGPT, hands-free, about advanced manufacturing and continuing to ask, so tell me more about that, but how would this apply? I don't understand that. I want to know how these two fields relate. I know that AI can work in this area. Could it be relevant there? And it's not your final output, but in terms of learning and really brainstorming and thinking about things, you really do want to be engaging. You want to use it as a tool that is your tool, and not just a question and answer. It's not a one-time flow. It really is productive in the brainstorming.
One of the macro shifts that's coming through here is that going to school and education used to be about teaching you the information you needed to know, but now that we carry all the world's information in our pockets, it's more about how to ask the right questions and elicit the information so that you can grow up and become a prompt engineer or one of these other newfangled jobs that didn't exist so long ago. How much of that restructuring is going on at the top of the curriculum redesign? Yes, individual teachers are in the trenches trying to figure out how to use these tools, but the bigger thought about what should be in the curriculum and how should the curriculum shift towards asking bigger questions rather than teaching the nuts and bolts. Where should that take place, and how is it taking place in any of your views?
Well, one thing is the three of our organizations together, ISTE, Code.org, OpenAI, Khan Academy, and the World Economic Forum, and dozens of other technology and nonprofits have come together to create a consortium effort to bring together governments, state departments of education, and even world ministries of education to think about this in a top-down fashion, because no individual teacher can change the curriculum, and even individual states could make changes, but then they'd worry about what are the other states doing, what are the universities doing, what are they doing in other countries. This is really a global problem to rethink what our schools even teaching. And we're at the precipice of a lot of change. The ChatGPT that came out in late 2022 is going to seem prehistoric in 2 years, because you had to type with it and it would type back. It would look like Microsoft DOS. We are already, as anybody who's seen the latest demos from OpenAI, we're going to be in a world of conversational AI. AI is going to be built into our glasses, seeing things and telling us things. And this should make us question, should we teach foreign languages at a time when we're going to have headphones that translate for us in real time, or glasses that translate for us in real time? Which subjects do we still need to continue to teach? Which subjects are critical for every student to know, versus those who want to chase it and follow it into their passions? So I personally think education needs a major upheaval. The good thing is this Teach AI consortium at least has brought together the right policy leaders to think about that. But I would say that the level of thinking is not yet revolutionary enough.
And I would say from that perspective, we really are committed to mutual learning. So in those conversations, we want to do everything we can to provide information about the technology, where it is, where it's going, how people can think about it and understand it. And then have the experts, the people who really understand teaching and learning deeply, to really be pouring in, what does this mean? And it is definitely convening and coalition, and all of us very much in this together, shaping what the next steps will be. And that's daunting, but also incredibly exciting to see people stepping in and really envisioning what this can mean.
But my challenge for this brain trust is, how do we get all of this to the classroom? Because to your point, at the state level, we don't dictate curriculum. We don't, the local districts adopt their curriculum. So we set the standards, what students will know and be able to do. but we do not dictate curriculum. And so, and a single teacher doesn't have the time or really the authority to change the curriculum. And so I think the question that we need to be asking is how, we saw this with Common Core implementation. It didn't always make it. Unpacking those standards and making those shifts didn't make it into the classroom. How is this going to be different? We have to make sure that the groups that are working on answering these big questions, like what are we going to teach? How are we going to teach? What is we need to be having conversations about what is the role of the teacher. That's a very controversial question to ask right now. But we have to be asking that question. And I'm anxious about translating all of this down into the trenches.
And I think it's a significant challenge, right? In our education space, we've added and added and added things.
Yes.
And I mean, I am a former assistant sup for teaching and learning. Curriculum has been my life for a long time, and trying to figure out what are those things that are going to be relevant 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. What are we going to take out to put this in, and how does it redefine what our classrooms look like and what learning looks like? Like we've been saying for a long time, learning is now anytime, anywhere. Oh my gosh, now more so than ever. How do we keep what's happening in our classrooms relevant for our students who are learning in 1,000 different ways now, and to help build what we want to see for us as a community moving forward? And it is the big conversation about what can we let go of, because we're not really good at letting go of things. And it isn't just educators, right? We've all been to school. So parents are like, but no, this is what we do in school, right? And you try to shift that so that we can prepare. I have a 5-year-old, and I have no idea what his world is going to be post-secondary, right? Like what we're preparing him for. And we have to help people from wherever they are shift into a conversation of it is changing, and what does that look like? But the letting go and the replacement and the shifting the role of teacher, those are all big things that we have to be doing together, as you said earlier.
Tara, you were mentioning to me earlier that when you talk to students, sometimes they won't admit that they're using ChatGPT if they think the teacher is looking. What is that dynamic? Are we going to bring it out from the shadows?
I certainly hope we do, right? It goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about this sense of, because we're not having the conversations about what it means, and teachers are not, there's also this conversation right now about teachers not being sure, should I say that I used it for my lesson plans, or should I say that I used it for this? And so they're not having the conversation with students, and so it creates this environment, instead of we're all in it together and we're all learning it together, to one of the fear that we were talking about earlier. And I think we have to shift that and bring it forward. And I think we also have to think about it really practically, because we have the guidance from states. I think 12 states now have guidance out. And there aren't a lot of do this, don't do that. And so now districts are grappling with so what does this mean? When you tell me I have to think about privacy, what does that mean for each of these tools that we're evaluating? If I'm going to play with it, can I play with that tool as a teacher? Is that okay? But which tools do I bring into the classroom based on all of the things that I need to be thinking about? And we have to surface the conversations. To your point, if kids won't talk about it, we also have to be talking about it and normalize the conversation, I think, to help move us forward. Because those are the sticking points, right? Like districts right now are saying, can I upload student work to grade if I de-identify it? Well, let's talk about intellectual property. Let's talk about privacy. Let's talk about, and those are the answers that they're looking for right now.
And I think Teach AI has put out
Yes,
such an incredibly helpful resource in really trying to compile and bring together so many thoughts and policy concerns from across the country. And I think just a really, really helpful body of work there. I also think there are times when the question that you want to ask is not something specific to AI, but really is, how can this tool help me to achieve what I was always trying to achieve? So one example we have there, Levi actually ran, another NGO actually ran a competition to say, how can AI actually help to address the 8th grade math gaps and problems? And really thinking through and having a competition around a particular kind of problem. But I think even more so when we look at equity and access in those questions, what does it mean? How can it be useful? And so sometimes the question is the same that it always was, and this is a new tool that you have, and sometimes you learn that the question itself has been transformed.
What are some of the, name a promising initiative or development that you are either working on or see in the field that you think augurs well for the future of how AI is going to influence students in the classroom. Anybody want to flag something?
We're right now working with Sal Khan from Khan Academy on bringing Conmigo to a very large cohort of elementary school teachers. So Conmigo will includes not just you toggle back and forth between student and teacher. So the teacher, we can load our North Carolina standards into Conmigo. The privacy and data security is already built in. And we can, if I'm a math teacher, or if let's say I'm a 9th grade English teacher, and I need an introductory lesson plan for Romeo and Juliet that focuses on a hook using vocabulary. I can ask Conmigo to create that for me, and it will spit out a lesson plan that's aligned to my state standards. The student function has one-to-one tutoring that will not give the student the answer. If the student tries to ask for the answer, the bot says, I know you want me to give you the answer, but it's really important that you learn to figure this out yourself. Let's look at your understanding of common denominators. And so what we can do is not just have efficiencies for teachers as this personal assistant, but we can also have one-to-one scaled personal tutoring for students.
I would say similarly that we are excited, and we don't work directly in the K through 12 space with students, but we are really excited about that personalization and multimodal and just what it means for accessibility and really for every learner. And I often, in these conversations, look at the room in front of me. Every human being is quite different and unique. And when you think about that and you actually think about the ability to have a tool that can help you to teach to individual students and individual people, that starts to get really exciting. And again, we will need many, many partners to figure that out, but we do think that the multimodal, multilingual, that it's pretty powerful thought of in that way.
One of the things that we are working on right now is a tool called Stretch AI, where we have taken ISTE resources, ASCD resources from decades, right, of research around pedagogy and instruction and technology and education, and created a specialized language model so that teachers can go in, and if they want to know about how might I incorporate digital citizenship, it's only pulling from the resources, right, that have been vetted, as opposed to the laundry list of things that are out in the world, some of which are awesome and some maybe not so much. And so that as they are planning lessons, and we're using it for some of the efficiencies, that we know we're using vetted resources, which is something that we're seeing a lot of right now in the field to try to help make sure that we have those pieces in place. And so we're excited about that potential to help teachers as they're framing their lessons and things.
And we on our learning platform, we've been teaching coding, but now at the end of our coding classes, we teach coding with AI, with a co-pilot that helps you once you learn the basics yourself. And that's a very natural extension, because basically learning to code is going to be replaced by learning to code with AI, and that's where our courses take the students. And we also rolled out a teacher's assistant that basically, like the other teaching assistants out there specific to the code.org platform, automates things like grading or looking at a student's projects and comparing them to the rubrics for the project and seeing how well they did to reduce time spent by teachers.
And you offered the smart recommendation that teachers who are a little fearful of this, or other educators, go play around with it, figure out what your students are figuring out. Any other recommendations or advice out there?
I think I'd turn to others. Can I go
go
backwards
back
for
to your
1
point.
second?
Yes,
Because
sorry. I
I
cut you
think
off.
just in case there are higher education and other people in the room, I think the other spaces we are really excited about, honestly, are higher education, teaching and learning administration, and research. So we actually have some amazing things happening behind the scenes with researchers around the world in health and education and many social sciences, economics. But also we are doing a lot of work globally. And that's also quite exciting. I mean, as a US-based entity, we do take seriously our responsibility everywhere in the world and are really excited about some of the things that are happening in the education space, really with partners around the world as well. So that's quite exciting to us. I think in terms of exactly to your question, I think we are pretty excited about challenges just because it allows that creativity and it allows us the mutual learning of seeing where people want to lean in.
Does that dovetail with what Hadi was describing, the OpenAI initiative, if I've gotten the name right? The global consortium?
That's Teach AI.
That's Teach AI. Thank you. Anyone else want to offer some recommendations for how you can, educators can learn more about this, get up to speed?
Well, I would encourage people in the room to look at the states that have created guidance for K-12. I know California has, for example, I know we have, and there are 10 others besides that. I think that, go to Magic School Bus's demo. Conmigo has a demo online. They're both trying to keep costs down for teachers. And I believe that Khan Academy just announced a partnership with Microsoft this week about that it's going to be, the teacher assistant piece is going to be free for teachers. And then they're looking at about $4 per student for the student piece. So I think that not banning, first of all, we can't stick our head in the sands and hope that this goes away. And I think that for folks working at the state level, allow district leaders to ease into this. They can't drag their feet, but they can ease in. I really like that we don't have this list of do's and don'ts, that we're, I have found as a state leader that the less that comes top down and the more that kind of comes in sideways, and then we come in underneath and support and just offer things and say, oh, we're hosting this on this day. If you come, there'll be free breakfast and lunch. And but I think that the easier you make this for teachers and for principals and district leaders, the easier it's going to go.
I think also giving opportunities to have innovation cohorts where you have groups of teachers trying things, doing things, building things that others can learn from is an essential thing, whether that's happening at the state level, and some states are trying to initiate different task forces and different innovation teams, and at the district level so that people can play with it, they can make the connections to teaching and learning, and we can focus on what is that vision? How do we get to the kinds of outcomes we want to see in our profiles of a graduate as we use these tools? And giving teachers the space to do that, because there is this continuum of this is the most amazing thing and I've been using it since the day it was launched, to that I am still not touching that no matter what. And meeting people where they are along that continuum matters a lot if we are going to be able to get this right, for lack of a better way to say it. And who knows what that right will be, right? Who knows?
Did you want to chime in?
I would say I agree with everything that's been said.
Great. Predictions. We have time for
Sorry,
predictions.
1 minute.
Either things that you anticipate or hope will happen as AI infuses itself into society and into our schools. How would you like to see things play out, or how do you think they're going to?
Well, I hope it changes the nature of teaching and learning. I really do. I think it's long overdue, first of all. We have got to evolve into the fifth revolution that's coming. We did not do a great job with the fourth revolution, in my opinion. And I think that the overhaul is just long overdue.
I want to second that. You know, one of the things I think about is most people don't realize the purpose, the original purpose of public education, or why we even set up public schools in this country. The original purpose of public education wasn't to get kids into colleges, because colleges weren't a thing. You know, there were a few colleges, and it wasn't to get students jobs, because students worked on farms. The original purpose of the public education system was to strengthen our democracy. And if we look at what is currently happening, I think people generally are a little worried about the status of our democracy, and there's polarization as part of that, but misinformation, disinformation, AI algorithms in our news feeds are all just mucking with it. And our public school system isn't really doing anything about that. It doesn't feel like that's its job, even though that's literally why it was originally created. And I think instead of regurgitating the same learnings that we would teach kids 100 years ago, we should rethink how much of that should we just throw in the dustbin or put it in the optional category for the students who want to become experts, and what does a kid really need to know to be successful in the 21st century, and frankly, for our democracy to work. Because students are learning more on TikTok and on YouTube and on Instagram than they are in the classroom. They actually are, because they're paying more attention, because that's where everybody else is, it's more relevant. And then in the classroom, they're like, I'm doing this so I can get into college, or I'm not even gonna go into college, I'm just doing it because I need to learn the quadratic equation to get a job at Starbucks, even though I'll never use that quadratic equation. And I think that whole system is a system of the past that needs a reinvention, and I agree wholeheartedly that my prediction is that AI becomes the change that makes us seem the most extinct unless we evolve it.
Very smart. Thank you for that. Final thoughts?
I've been noting in the back the
the
we are
time.
out of time piece, so I was like,
Thank you.
second all of the things, right? But I think it is about this, how we shift learning and how we shift what's happening in our schools and districts right now.
Yeah, I think I'm incredibly excited to see the leaders that will come out of this moment and sort of where they will take the educational system. And also tremendously excited, I'm the mom of a 9-year-old, and when I think through what his experience in the classroom could look like, it does actually make me just incredibly excited to see where we're headed.
Thanks to all of you for your smart thoughts.
Thank you.